In our first panel discussion, we will delve into the role of energy in shaping our world and how access to diminishing natural resources will influence our future. We all recognize the infinite growth is impossible on a planet with finite resources. The way our panel will be structured, that after I calling all the panel members of it, there will be 5 minutes for each of them for the short introduction and share their point of view regarding the topic with you. And after they all did it in 5 minutes, 4 of them, then we will jump into the discussion. So ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming our panel members in the following order. Mr. András Gelencsér, Mr. János Zlinszky, Mr. Simon Michaud, and the moderator, please, Ms. Alexandra Köves. Enjoy the discussion.
Hello to everyone. I'm really happy to be here, and thank you for the opportunity to moderate this panel. And I was told that we all have 5 minutes to have our kind of first thoughts on the topic, and then we can delve into discussing them. So can you please, András, start?
Okay, I have prepared a small presentation. I hope it will be within 5 minutes, but it's already started when you started discussion. Okay, let's start with how the world works. There are many global problems. I don't want to list them because it would just consume my 5 minutes. And in a real world, this should be tackled with the help of science. But now the world has prepared a new realm of mass illusions, in which politicians and people feel like staying. And in this realm, these complex problems are too complicated to be dealt with. Therefore, they fabricate a one-bit message, and along with some business interests, they make a virtual solution which has nothing to do with the real problem. And let's see what's the one-bit statement in sustainability. As we know, the most frequently quoted sustainability problem is climate change, and its one-bit message is that CO2 causes global problems or global warming, and global warming can be stopped by stopping CO2 emissions. And that brings us to the virtual solution, that is decarbonization. Like in the fairy tales, you have the bad guy, the oil and fossil fuel, and the good guys are all the renewables. And if you replace the fossils with renewables, then all the problems of the world will be solved. But that's, of course, a very simple, simplistic approach, and it's not true. And let's have a look at where we are in this process. So green energy, as we know, green energy transition will save the world. Here you see the figure for the IPCC, latest IPCC report. Then we have carbon dioxide emission on the rise, but we have targets to reduce it by the mid-century or by 2060. And it was agreed upon in Paris in the form of the Paris Agreement. But we are still on the rise. If you consider the real emission, it's going upward. So there is no energy transition is taking place on a global scale. But it's an issue whether we can do it or not. Unfortunately, all the statistical reports of the world energy use say that states that CO2 emissions is on the rise. Last year, it rose by more than almost 1% compared to the previous year, and fossil fuels still make up about 82% of the global energy mix. But if you consider that 97% of all global energy is used for running global economy and infrastructure, with existing energy infrastructure, then we are in a relatively desperate position. And all the renewables have to be manufactured with existing energy infrastructures, and they last only for 1 or 2 decades. But the biggest problem is that about 50% of global energy use, for 50% there is not a single zero carbon alternative at scale. For example, heavy industries or shipping, global shipping, aviation, military works with fossil fuels only. There is no alternative at scale. And I offer for those who can provide a single example of all of these sectors, a zero carbon alternative, a box of Dom Perignon champagne. Nobody has ever approached me with a solution yet. I hope there will be some in the future. So my final statement is that the chance of achieving zero carbon emission in a growing global economy is the same as replacing the engines of a plane in flight. Thank you.
Thank you so much. János.
Yes, thank you very much, Alexandra. I would like to start or pick it up from where our rector at the University of Public Services left it off. He was quoting Dennis Meadows, and I was also thinking of bringing Professor Meadows into the room for just these few minutes, because as he wrote the special introduction to the volume of Limits to Growth, which, by the way, and this is the advertisement, you can buy at the desk over there, he was contemplating on our present situation in the light of what we have learned from that study. And he said that and I quote, "I believe that global society is entering an extended period during which its demands on the resources of this planet will be reduced by a variety of physical and social processes. And those demands will be forced back down to levels that can be borne by the Earth." And I mean, Meadows, do not know the precise timing, nor can I identify the events that will make that happen, but I expect they will have 4 features. So I just want to list briefly these 4 features. First, it is the present generation that will experience the greatest traumas from which derive forces that cause decline in population in productive capital. Because for a population to decline, the death rate must exceed the birth rate. So either the birth rate sinks or the death rate rises. And since attempts to reduce fertility have become politically unacceptable, those blocking these attempts are implicitly choosing to rely on rises in the death rate for the inevitable transition. And similarly, for production to decline, the depreciation of productive capital must exceed the investment rate. So attempts to reduce investments are unacceptable, which means that depreciation will rise. Second, he expects that the various environmental and social factors that arise to force the physical dimensions of our global society back down to bearable levels will be regarded as problems and treated as separate problems. I mean, phenomena like climate change, spreading viruses, growing food shortages, rising price of energy, mounting level of persistent pollutants, they will cannot be eliminated by suppressing their symptoms, but they are likely to be treated with these efforts of suppressing their symptoms. Third, as the inevitability of the end of growth becomes more widely accepted, there will be a shift in emphasis from preventive measures at the global level to adaptive measures at the local level. So, and this we had heard earlier from Rector Deli, that the goal of global sustainability may give way to the goal of local resilience. And sustainability and resilience, of course, are very different from each other. Sustainability is a goal for the global system. We have that goal. Resilience is a characteristic of the system's behavior, is the capacity of the system to absorb shocks and still continue to produce essential results. A system is not sustainable unless all components are sustainable or subsystems are sustainable. One leak is enough to sink a ship, okay? But a system becomes more resilient every time one of its components become more resilient. So this is a sort of a different characteristic to the two efforts. One is an either-or issue, the other one is incremental. And finally, the fourth expectation is that the biggest threat of declining growth will be to the social fabric of society. Because there's this promise of indefinite growth, more for everyone forever, and that has been the single largest contribution to the social cohesion necessary for effective governance. But then, when everyone understands that growth will no longer be possible, and if this comes up to life being a zero-sum game, then governance systems will have a problem to accomplish necessary changes, because those fearing to lose out will be likely to block action. So any of the present governance systems could potentially produce a more attractive future for humanity, but then it ought to reflect a concern for equity, environment, resilience, welfare. But these are distant in time, and it's difficult for governments to consider impacts distant in time and space and hold them as important as proximate goals. So this would be my introductory thoughts. Thanks. Actually, not mine, but...
Simon?
Cheers, mate. Does that work? Right, good. Well, so what are my thoughts on this matter? What really have I learned from the work that I've been putting out there? Like, what does humans need for our materials and energy? And what's interesting is if you take a historical perspective, so over the last couple of thousand years, what have we done with our materials and why? And our biology tells us what to do a lot of the time. So as we've gone along, we've become more sophisticated in human consciousness, and that's changed how we look at things. The next era, I feel, the last century, per capita, we've required more and more and more materials, more and more energy, and most of us haven't given a second thought where those materials come from, or that energy comes from. We're about to be given a lesson in manners why we should start looking at that. The path going forward is a change in how us humans see these things. Per capita, for every person, our system has to shrink. That doesn't mean we have to get poorer or we have to start going without things, but our priorities have to change. We're a very materialistic culture at the moment. It's very wasteful in many, many respects. And some of the decisions, when you go up to orbit and look down back on the rest of the planet and ask certain basic questions, some of our decisions look flamboyantly stupid. We've got to have a greater awareness of this going forward. I've come up with a series of questions which has actually brought into sharp contrast our existing plans. I found some very, very simplistic solutions that might be worth looking at, but I've also found a series of really unorthodox ideas that far into our future we might develop. So this is by no means the end of human innovation. That human innovation is only useful, though, if we do it. We collectively actually apply these ideas. It's no good actually sort of putting together useful ideas if they're not applied. Then we all sort of cry into our beer when things don't go well. We actually got to get off the couch and do some work. So the reason I'm sharing the stage with the people to my right is the source of the way forward is actually us. What we believe, how we believe, why we believe, and the consequences of what we don't believe. That, at its very, very start, has a ripple effect that then goes out to everything else and talks to how do we apply what we know? And what do we develop? And then once we develop, what do we do with it? Jacques Fresco developed the Venus Project, which is I'm now actually sort of looking at. And he would often say things like, he lived through World War II, and he watched nation states taking turns destroying each other. And the amount of resources and energy they consumed in doing so could have developed the planet many times over. What did we achieve? An interesting question. Anyway, so these questions are open-ended. These discussions are open-ended. I would encourage people to think that there are solutions through this with the phrase, the system that we're all born and bred to serve is fragmenting around us and is in deeper shit than usual. We are not. It is up to us to invent a new system. And if we don't do it, well, Anyway, thanks.
I recently learned that I also have 5 minutes, but Balázs knows that I can speak 5 minutes anytime. So I'm an ecological economist and also a degrowth scholar and work for the degrowth movement as well. And basically what we're saying is that we're all driving a car. We're driving a car towards a wall, and we don't want to stop or slow down because then the music will stop. But a lot of people in here, they focus on what happens after the crash. We focus on how to make people to slow down. Yeah, the snail is the symbol of the degrowth movement. And what we have to see is the economy is embedded in the society is embedded in the ecological world, and they're not just embedded, they're entangled. So it's very difficult to say which is which. It's all one systemic thing. So therefore, we need the systems view that we've already heard of today. And in such a system, basically, what's the role of the economy? The role of the economy is to provide well-being for all within planetary boundaries. Now, with that one, we need to see what well-being is. What is well-being? Which part of well-being, or the good life, sometimes we say the good life for all. What is the good life? What part of good life comes with a material throughput? But what part of the good life is actually something that we don't need materials for? We don't need energy for. We can simply just enjoy things without its impact. And the other thing is for all. Once we start talking about planetary boundaries, we realize that it's all about distribution. How we distribute. We can't possibly talk about these topics without talking about how we distribute things, how people access energy, who accesses energy. And degrowth is not about degrowing the economy senselessly. Now we're growing the economy without actually understanding why we need it. Degrowth is about trying to kind of take out the growth imperatives and start not focusing on growth. If we're degrowing now, we're going into recession. But that's not what degrowth is about. Degrowth is not about recession. Degrowth is about trying to figure out how we can live a good life within planetary boundaries. And what do you need for that? What do you need for people to kind of stop the acceleration and understand that it doesn't matter if the music stops? I think in a complex system, in such a complex system where we're all just tiny little nodes, people don't really believe they have an impact. How can they have an impact? But they are actually, whatever they do, they are keeping the big system going. So they also have the power to stop it going. But for that, they need a complete different vision. And I'm not sure that vision should be a negative one. I actually think degrowth is about a positive vision. How we can start imagining a world where we think of the good life very differently to what we think now. So when it comes to energy, it's quite obvious. I mean, we saw it from Simon's presentation this morning. If we need more and more energy, it doesn't matter what color, and I'm sorry, it doesn't matter whether it's green or purple. If we need more and more and more and more, it's not the question of what kind of energy we have. It's the question, why can't we stop wanting to have more? And I think simply what degrowth is about is to make people believe that once we hit the brakes, they will be able to start listening to different music. So that's my first thoughts, and I'll go back and. Okay, so we keep talking about green transitions, whatever that means. And I'd like to know whatever that means to you, and what you think it means to the mainstream, and what you think it should mean to maybe us.
Actually, I don't like the word green for anything that is made by humans, because yes, that's because these man-made things lack one important property of nature, namely reproduction. So these are unable to be reproduced and to reproduce themselves, unlike nature. So that I think green should be reserved for nature only, and all the rest are just infrastructure which needs to be renewed by ourselves by using material and energy. So I frequently call the example of solar panels, which are simple things like irons in the households. They are converting energy, solar energy to electric energy, and it's just the reverse what an iron does in the household. It converts electric energy to heat. But no one ever dares to say that iron is renewable, because it lasts for decade or two, and then it becomes waste. So it's not renewable. So that's my additional concern for green transition, that we we use terms which are unfounded.
Yeah, well, if I'm doing it in sort of this way, left to right,
way
what does the mainstream think about green transition? I think probably most of people think that we can keep doing what we have been doing, but using a different technology. Basically that's it. Actually, probably the majority would say we can get more than what we have now, but with a different technology. And of course, we already heard many times that that's a fundamental mistake.
So, to answer your question, this is coming from a couple of years of trying to talk to people as senior civil servants in the European Union and the United States. This opinion has the capacity to upset people. For that, I apologise. But the green transition, I have come to the conclusion, is a PR exercise to convince the voting public that there is a plan. And that PR exercise is branding. They use green because leaves are green. And the people who organised that branding don't actually believe in the green transition at all. In fact, if our world is run by banking hedge funds, which I believe it is, not politicians, and if you were to line up those bankers and herd them into a corner with a sharp stick, and if you were to demand some answers out of them, and they actually told you what they seem to think. They think in terms of growth, complexity, and they don't care about the consequences of anything or anyone as long as they personally get more money. And that is actually at the heart of everything. What everyone else thinks the green transition is a way of actually running society that has no carbon emissions. Now, what is interesting is they don't seem to understand that if they were to do that, it involves doing things in a way that is actually quite environmentally destructive, and it's not green at all. A 4,000% increase in the mining industry in areas that are ecologically very sensitive. What could possibly go wrong with that? Right, so my whole approach to life in general now is to stop listening to other people, stop listening to what they think, and invent systems myself and get out there and create new things with like-minded people. I also work with groups like the Club of Rome and other groups, and I think, yes, they have things to offer, but instead of actually sort of applying what they're putting out there with, as advertised, take what they've learned and create a new system with those learnings. And so you put all problems on the table at the same time with all solutions, and you evolve something new. And the outcome is for those who choose to see it. Yeah.
Well, I think when we talk about the green transition, I agree with Simon that it's more of a co-opted idea. Maybe it used to be something real, but now it's definitely co-opted. It's the promise that with technology we can decouple through efficiency. We can basically decouple any sort of environmental burdens from economic growth, and we obviously can't do it. And what we use instead is ecological transformation. And ecological transformation is like we imagine the current economy being an elephant, and basically we're trying to transform that elephant into a snail. And that, to us, that's the eco-transformation, like transforming the elephant into the snail. And this is why I think we need to start talking about transformation a lot more than transition. Well, it probably doesn't take long until they co-opt that as well, but we can until then we can talk about that. I think today we've talked a lot about why we don't have enough natural resources for this kind of green transition. But Simon also came up with some ideas of a different kind of technology, kind of substituting the technology where we could have that kind of energy. My question is, do we have already the knowledge? Do we have already the technology to finance either the green transition or what I call the eco-transformation?
So, a lot of the technology I'm looking at is at what you would call pilot scale. What that means is we think it works, but there are some problems to work out still, which means we don't quite know how we're going to apply it. I think from a technology point of view, there's less to do on that level. There is a lot to do with how we use it. You know, we as a species have to grow up, we have to do things differently. We're very childish and in many respects, but also I believe our leadership is having terms dictated to it by a belief system that's really not helping. You know, where did the growth economy come from? How is it we're letting the Muppets of Cutthroat Island tell us what to do? You know, there is much more to do for us socially. The technology that, I don't think it's appropriate, for example, to say, rip out certain technology and do a straight substitution and hold the economy going the way it is at the moment. I don't think that would work. What would work is you would develop a series of subsystems at a smaller level, which has a smaller footprint that does something vital, which means if that was replicated everywhere, the outcome would have a much smaller footprint. And so we have a degrowth in terms of the human footprint. We can withdraw from the natural environment and let the natural environment heal itself. How do we do that? That's a socially hard thing to do and suggest. In terms of technology development, let's say we're 80% of the way there if we chose to go a particular path. Socially, 10%.
May I maybe add that I think that, and actually I used earlier this quote from the Venice Declaration that the economics and technological solutions are not the core solutions and the core of the problem, but we have a moral problem at the bottom of the whole thing, and so we have to look at the whole system and having that in mind, look at the different parts of it. And I sometimes say to sort of fellow Christians that, you know, it would be really ridiculous to have a sort of a Christian spiritual movement saying that we would really emphasize, you know, keeping the commandment, thou shalt not steal. And, well, let the rest to the side for a moment, because this is really important, and that's what we ought to push. And it's difficult to have 10. I mean, but let's concentrate on one of them. So it's a little bit the similar with dealing with any complex system. We have the Sustainable Development Goals. We don't talk about equity. So when we consider our possibilities in means of material means and technological means, we cannot get away from that champagne glass distribution of global wealth and global income. So there's something to sort out, and if you go for goal number 10 and deal a little bit with it first, and then look at your resources again, then you might be having a much better starting point. So there are many facets of this problem.
But I think that the technologies mentioned are not new at all. The last technology available for humanity was actually nuclear fission that has effectively utilized as an energy production method. But all the other methods are hundreds of years of age, such as battery technology started in the mid-19th century and achieved only a factor of 4 in efficiency. So it's not really new, and they can be calculated. I mean, all the energy efficiency of all these technologies can be easily calculated.
and can be scaled up or down depending on the requirements. But there is a fundamental problem. We cannot return to old times because the resources are now very unevenly distributed, and then we need globalization in order to get access to the resources. Therefore, we need to keep, for example, global transport, like shipping, and in order to get the material needed for the technologies. And that creates problem. If you have a local solution, you can do it in a very small region, but when you rely on materials and energy from other parts of the world, then you need all the technologies that are able to transfer these resources to your country or to your place. So that's a hard job.
I wonder if it's at all possible to actually phase out fossil fuels, because all the technologies that we're talking about, they somehow require fossil fuels to become into existence. So how could that work? Is there any way to phase out fossil fuels within 2 decades?
No, there isn't. I showed that fossil fuels are in the core of everything. It's still over 80% in a global energy mix, and there are special applications like shipping when there is no alternative at all. So that's at scale. So that, for example, there are 60,000 cargo vessels around in the world oceans, and they are continuously on the move. So they should be somehow refurnished with some alternative technologies which don't exist. So there is absolutely, it is impossible to do it within 2 decades. Just consider the technological times. You cannot build a nuclear power plant next Sunday. You need at least a decade to get one operational. So that's absolutely impossible. And just remember, where does decarbonization take place? Only in sectors at the end use, like electric cars, heat pumps, and what else? But there are not many examples for which people are willing to pay, but nothing at the upstream. I mean technology. There is no decarbonization at all. Just at the end point with very good marketing of green transition, decarbonization, selling electric cars like SUVs, 4 tons, weighing 4 tons, with a battery of 1.5 tons as a green solution. So that's good.
I did take part in a study once, is what would happen if we mined without fossil fuels. We're now going to mine copper. How do we do it without burning fossil fuels? So now our power source, instead of from, say, a gas power station, which is how we usually do it, like a gas pipeline out to somewhere remote to a power station, the power station then runs the mine and everything in it. And what we ended up with is things like you needed a solar panel array wind turbine system that was so huge, and the battery bank that it would require to do it made the whole operation unviable. So what happens is most of what we consider economically viable in terms of mining would be forced to go offline if we were to force the issues to say no fossil fuels now. And so what that means is a lot of what we do at the moment is dependent on fossil fuels to operate, but if we were to throw the switch in the wrong sequence of events, a lot of what we would do would just shut down. That's one way of degrowing, I suppose. But if we actually genuinely want to rebuild as a society quickly, like in the next 20 years, that's a really fast transition. It took more than a century to build what you see around you now. So if we want to do it in 20 years, we have to use the systems we have now, or we say if we want to do it without fossil fuels, you've got to build the tools to build the tools to build the tools with technology not developed yet, using science we think might work. That is decades of work right there. And so in a larger scale of things, do we have the luxury of time? And so we've got to balance everything against everything else. There is a path through if we make some trade-offs with the understanding we're not going to like those trade-offs. That's the unfortunate outcome.
Well, some sort of outlier considerations. One is that there's the haves and have-nots in this world, and we are sort of implicitly having, I think this, and correct me if I'm wrong, but we are sort of having an implicit discussion about a little bit ourselves. So I mean, Hungary as it is, Europe as it is, the North as it is, middle class as it is. So we tend to forget that there are really the majority of humanity on Earth badly needing things to get for a life in human dignity. So the huge task really is to provide that one, which is an imperative, and to do this at the expense of the affluent. And then again, we are back to the paradigm change. And the paradigm change should be about well-being. It was already on the table. And we know from different branches of research that sort of true well-being, true happiness, to use the correct word, does not really stem, or very limited ways it stems from material things. So, but this is really hard to get through if we don't tackle the counter current what we have in the most powerful grown-up education, adult education system of this world, which is marketing and advertisement. So if governments are not willing to tackle head-on, this sort of inciting people to live in an unsustainable way, then we will have real difficulties. You were referring to trade, to global trade. But I mean, I don't want to say percentages, but what a percentage of that global trade is actually crap and completely unnecessary. I mean, utterly unnecessary. Utterly unnecessary.
Someone write that down.
It must be really a very high percentage. Talking about fossil fuels, just one last comment. I read it once, and I may attribute it wrong, but the last Persian Shah was attributed to have said that the most serious sin 21st century man will attribute to 20th century man is that they burned a very important industrial raw material, oil, for the plastic industry. So now where we are really not just sort of concerned that we can't or we cannot stop burning fossil fuels, we also in a way see the remaining amount of fossil fuels. And okay, they will last for a while, but I mean, we sort of can see that they can run out eventually. So what will we make, I don't know, artificial heart valves or any medical equipment of? I mean, will it be wood? Yes, it can be, because ecological carbon is now slowly starting to compete with fossil fuels as a plastic industry raw material. But that will be a disaster if it really comes in. So I don't want to change the subject completely, but again, it's a very complex situation. And if we get rid of 80% of the unnecessary global trade, then we are that much better off.
Yes, a couple of years ago, I came across a document called, I forgot what it was. It was the strategy of the air transport industry for how to have carbon emissions by 2050. And when I read the document, I couldn't believe what I was seeing, because I thought no degrowther could ever come up with such a good document. It was the air transport industry think tank writing us and telling us that they don't have the technology they need to shift. Whatever ideas they have for the transition, they don't have the money to invest into the research. So they do want the people, the governments, to start paying for such research. And afterwards, they said, well, all the scenarios, even if they found this, all the scenarios contained at least 60% of something called offsetting, which has absolutely nothing to do with reducing carbon. It actually, it's a financial trick to actually colonize, lands in Africa and a lot of other countries. So it's hugely problematic. So, and they were saying that, but even after that, you have to accept that until the year 2035, we're actually going to grow in our carbon emissions. And then with the technology we don't know, with the funds, we have no idea where they come from, we're going to have offsetting. And I was thinking, wow, I could not have come up with anything better than that to actually show what degrowth could be. So we wrote an article on that, and you can search for it, you can find it. But what's quite amazing that they actually wrote that 20%, 25% of their carbon emissions come from short-haul flights. So they could actually, just by stopping short-haul flights, they could actually cut 25% carbon tomorrow. But of course, we're not living in a degrowth world. We don't expect them to do that. They actually said, no, we don't want carbon taxes. We don't want to let go cheap tickets, and we want Asian and African countries to be able to start flying because they haven't been flying before. So we need to provide that option of increasing.
Okay, I would add the example of green hydrogen, which is my personal favorite. Green hydrogen is effectively water electrolysis, so the production of hydrogen from water. And this technology is known for 200 years, and it's available at scale for about 50 years or 70 years. But only 0.1% of industrial hydrogen is produced from water nowadays. So the technology is there at scale. So any oil industry or fertilizer plant can use it, but nobody does. And simply because it requires 3 times as much energy as production from natural gas. So all choose production from natural gas because they can't sell the fertilizers at 5 times more higher price than from green hydrogen. So that's an example of hypocrisy, so that they are talking about decarbonization, they have the technology at scale and they don't use it. And when there is a plant, I think from this week, there was at a mall facility, there was a green hydrogen plant providing only 3% of the company's annual hydrogen input, and that was announced as a breakthrough and a new era, start of a new era, whereas it's nothing new in it.
Well, one of the crucial points in, for example, in this aviation industry's strategy was this problem of finding technologies and financing technologies. And it seems that there's also like a huge, even in their own way of thinking, there's like a huge investment gap into new kind of a technology or solutions or these kind of things that, you know, we have no idea where the money comes from. Do you think there is an investment gap, or do we need investment, or should we just scrap it?
Okay, so I think that there is another problem. If you shift to another technology, for example, in the case of green hydrogen, you shift to photoelectrolysis, or for example, iron production, you shift to green steel production, then it would require more energy. So immediately, the energy need for maintaining the same level of production increases by a factor of 2 to 3. And I very often quote the example of Iron Age, which was only possible with the minimum level of energy needed to produce iron. There is no aluminum age in the history, because humanity didn't have enough energy to produce alumina. Therefore, this era was only possible with fossil fuels. So there is an immediate doubling or tripling of energy need when we change or shift to a new technology which was not at the energy minimum. Like all the technologies, these are really the best technologies available. I mean, in terms of energy. That's why they were possible in historical times. So this aspect is very frequently overlooked when talking about transition, that we immediately, even at constant stationary economy, we increase the energy need of humanity by a factor of 2 or 3 by changing new technologies.
So is there an investment gap? That's actually a loaded question. Years ago, I used to work for the mining industry, and I was learning, among other things, the corporate side, the finance side of how mining operations happen. And you start to meet these people and what their mentality is. Last year, I went to Hong Kong and I presented to a capital investment group an earlier version of what I presented to today. And as what happens is the presentation itself, for me, I've given it before, I know, but for me, it's about observing the audience. There were 1,800 venture capitalists, over 40 billionaires in the room, and this was in China with the backing of the PRC government. And over coffee, you get to talk to these guys and girls. And you go, and it really did strike me as their mood was very different, because the previous meeting was the Australian Parliament, and they were very anxious. They were very worried about, what were they to do, because now they've committed to things. People in Hong Kong, they were very sanguine. They said, we're rich. We don't care if the world burns, we'll be fine. And so we want to know is, where do we put our money to get more money? And what struck me was, if these people watched a James Bond film, they would sympathise with the villain. They would see James Bond turning up and destroying something that someone just like them had actually spent a lot of time to build. And I thought, what I was looking at was these people were a serious part of the problem. Every single one of them thought in terms of tax havens. So the idea of international tax law that we are all subject to, they're not part of. In our world, according to our laws, they hold all the value. They hold all the keys. They make all the decisions with regard to, do we invest or not? And what that taught me, well, to do what I wish to do in the next era of my professional career, I need to be able to talk to these people and get to work with them, and they will give me $5 billion for my plans. But what it struck me was the way they were actually sort of driving society in a particular way is we were never going to face these problems properly. the majority of society is just going to be left out in the cold, which means we are going to see a fragmentation. But what I also believe is that's not the end. We won't allow it. So we'll see the fragmentation, but then human society will pull a phoenix maneuver. From the ashes of that fragmented system, a new system will arise. Will it be built by the people I saw in Hong Kong? No, it'll be built by us. Right, so the idea of a transition, it's a nice word, it makes me feel good. Transformation, that's not bad, yeah.
I know.
Well, is there an investment gap? Again, three short thoughts. One is that certainly with the poor, there is an investment gap, and I don't even dwell on that longer. But a second kind of question, okay, investment into which form of capital? Okay, so we have these forms of capital. Where's the wealth of nations? So yes, there is an investment gap into human capital. Yes, there is an investment gap into social capital. Yes, there's a huge investment gap into natural capital. And well, we can talk about the rest maybe, but these certainly are the urgent ones, and probably at the present time bringing better returns as well than other possibilities. And finally, just a short question. Let us count until 10 in just inside ourselves, and in those 10 seconds, try to think about a device in or near in your household which is energy consuming, but you don't really need it. So if you wouldn't use it ever again, it would not cause major disruption to your life. Just think about it.
TikTok.
We often hear that, yeah, well, fusion energy is around the corner and that will solve anything, you know, anything and everything. Let's just imagine, because we're here to talk about energy, I realize. So let's just for 1 second imagine that we had fusion energy tomorrow. Accessible for everyone. Free, accessible for everyone. Fantastic. We've solved it. We've nailed it. Would we have to change then?
Yes. Oh, right.
Okay. So we sorted that one out. Let's see how. And I want to spend the next 35 minutes talking about mitigation rather than adaptation. How can we change in the next couple of years? What can we change? What should we change so that we don't hit the wall?
Okay, so from a design point of view, like we're up in orbit now looking down at planet Earth for the last couple of thousand years. And if you boil it down to the macro scale tasks, one is our industrial system has a waste plume, which is a problem. Two, how we grow our food is a problem. Because, you know, the phosphorus cycle, the nitrogen cycle, the green revolution that was the petrochemical revolution from the 1930s to the 60s, here we are. And the other problem is the human system has grown in size without any sort of checks and balances. If we were given infinite energy and money wasn't a problem anymore, and we all put aside our differences and said, well, let's look at it, we have to repair, help the system that we call planet Earth. And I see the James Lovelock view of the world where the planet is a system and the planet is embedded in a larger system. The safety, that the long-term stability of the planet is regulated by life on Earth. Life on Earth is protected by the magnetic field, which interacts with the sun. The sun gives us life, but also we need to be protected from the sun, and so on. And it's a balanced system that dynamically regulates itself. And that system is now in the process of finding a new equilibrium. What I would like to see is if we used our technology and our industry and our ability to start repairing certain systems. And the system that I'm most worried about is the oceans, ocean acidification. There's now more plastic in the seas than fish, or at least there soon will be. Most of the time, is the radio on up there? Yeah.
It's the translation.
Oh, right. I just heard the word psychedelic drug. What? Yeah, okay, so the plastics in the sea, that's now an industrial problem, and it's now on an industrial scale. So it needs to be sorted out with an industrial solution. At the same time, we've got to look at, it's wiping out the bottom end of the food chain. And that long term for large vertebrate mammals like us isn't good. I would like to see us harvesting plastics out of the ocean in terms of cleaning them up. And I have proposed a solution to do that. Everyone likes the solution, but I've yet to see anyone take it seriously. But I want to see things like rehabilitation of land that's been sterilised by industrial agriculture. If you want to reduce the carbon problem, start planting trees like you mean it. You know, clean up the seas. Take some of our technologies that we've developed just because that's how we've evolved, phase them out and replace them with something else. And you know, things like the use of asbestos in insulation in buildings. We realised that was a problem and we have phased it out. Take that approach and then apply it to other parts of our sectors. We've got to understand our true relationship with the planet, but then start behaving like we mean it. But they're the two actions, they're the two sectors I'd like to see us operate in. Clean up the seas, rehabilitate the land that has been sterilised. And from there, other things will happen.
Well, I'm glad you brought up mitigation because I think we really should not fall off on the other side of the horse and talking about adaptation, give up mitigation. We must remember that airbags, car airbags come with speed limits. So in other words, I mean, you have speed limits and you have airbags. So if you crash, then the airbags are supposed to take some of the impact, but you are not supposed to go much faster than an exact speed, and that's what the airbag is sort of scaled for. So you cannot adapt. Airbags are adaptive. Okay, speed limits are in a way preventive in a way. So unless we agree on the maximum speed we will have, industry doesn't know what to plan the airbag for. So in other words, if we give up mitigation, if we give up the endeavor to stabilize the system, then we don't know, you know, what to adapt to at the end of the day. Then adaptation will be a continuous running after ourselves and the situation completely careering out of control. So I think that this is a very important endeavor, and it's worth hitting the wall with the slower speeds, in other words. So completely important. And all I wanted to add to what you said is that ecosystem rehabilitation in general terms, nature-based solutions in general terms are very, very useful, very cost-effective, bringing real benefits and indispensable at the same time. So unless we also sort of rehabilitate terrestrial soils and actually give up this whole sterile chemistry or chemicals-based macro agriculture, we hit the wall anyway. So again, this is the win-win solution while with stabilizing food supply for the long run and having a very good chance of really sizable carbon capture. So the seas, yes, but also the soils, the surface of the earth.
Someone write that down.
I have two additional suggestions. One is immediate banning of advertisements and marketing. That would reduce consumption by 30% immediately. So that's simple and very easy to accomplish, I guess. And the second is that in the case of countries that have diminishing population, they should start redevelopment, which means that giving back to nature lands, because now all the developed countries are still going upwards. They are still building in all the land use change, yeah. And for example, China use more concrete within 2 years than the United States throughout the entire 20th century. So it's with diminishing population. So that should be returned or reversed, like we should give back more land to nature immediately. So stop calling that development, that we cover with concrete anything.
Yes, I would add ban glitters. No, not just that. I also think that we need to start focusing on how much we work. We should work a lot less. Yeah. We should work a lot less because, believe it or not, work is one of the biggest driving forces of economic growth. So if we work less and we don't use the 3rd or 4th day for, flying off to somewhere else, then that could reduce that could enable degrowth. So first of all, we should work a little bit less. We should use that for convivial activities rather than resource consumption. I think we should also give certain natural entities a legal status and start acting upon it. So anybody who's overusing it or should be taken responsible for it. There are like a million different things that we could also do. But I think what you've covered quite a lot of the industries, but I also think distribution is something we need to start focusing on. So I'm talking about income caps. I'm talking about basic universal basic allowances to give some cushion for the transitions we need. So start the redistribution. I think that's also crucial. And one thing that you've already touched upon, and I want to reiterate, is decolonization. I think we can't possibly talk about any kind of transformation without talking about decolonization. And of course, degrowth looks something very, very different in the global south than it should look in the global north. So these are my additions, but I guess we could go on for a lot longer. But we have talked, coming back to kind of the energy issue, we have talked about technology in a very pejorative way, or quite pejorative way. But should it be like that? Or can we use technology the right way? Or how can we use technology the right way?
Yeah, okay. The work that I'm doing at the moment, I'm actually mapping out the island state of Hawaii. What would Hawaii have to do to phase out fossil fuels? This is like a microcosm of the rest of the planet. What's interesting, there are 10 scenarios. Take out fossil fuels and we're going to do something else. In all scenarios that are appropriate, not all tasks are the same. So we're talking about different solutions and everything, but what's interesting is some tasks have a much greater influence, impact than others. Now, what I've learned from the Hawaii simulation is 80% of the energy is taken up by finding a replacement for trucks. Not cars, trucks. Now, our society runs on trucks. The delivery of freight and goods, across the landscape. Our society can't function without that. So the first question is, can we do something different where we don't need so much stuff to move such a long distance? Second question, the stuff we do need to move, can we move it without trucks? We still get the same outcome, but we don't use the same technology. And the solution I'm putting forward is, when you look at truck transport, it's not also equal either. There's a non-linear distribution. Most ton kilometres are happening on a relatively small number of routes, like between major cities or within cities along major arterials between depots. So, along those routes that have high truck traffic, I propose the idea of having a monorail to move people, but under the monorail is a cargo pod system that I saw on a mine site to move ore around. We're going to take like a shipping container, so instead of putting it on a truck, you put it under an underslung cargo pod that will then shoot up and down a rail system between, like along a route that has high traffic. What we're doing is reducing the number of trucks on the road, and its power will come off the power grid, not be associated with the internal combustion fuel transport network. What that means is our society would have a different architecture to it. The technology behind it is not that complicated. It's just that we're taking what we're using and we're applying it differently. So to have a go at answering your question, take what we have, use it from a different paradigm. And from a different paradigm, the limitations become different if we understand what we have to do is not equal.
Yes, there's technological development and technology development. There certainly can be needs-driven technology development. I have a friend at Berkeley, and they worked with their physics students to design a stove for the African refugee camps, which then it sank more than 80% the need for fuel wood for women to gather around the refugee camps. So it need to be wood fuel saving. It needed to be cheap. It needed to be very easy to assemble. It needed to be producible in developing countries. And it was quite a work to put it together, and it sounds a simple thing. But the same thing, the iron powder furnace you were talking about. I mean, these are real needs which then are met by genuine technology development. That's absolutely great. And there's the profit-driven or marketing-driven technology development, so that I can bend my mobile phone or whatnot. I mean, I don't have it, but I just see it on the advertisement. Why on earth should I bend my mobile phone? But then here it is, and you should have it. And I would add, and that's my last point, that again in Laudato Si, Pope Francis spent some time in talking about the dictatorship of technology and the absurd requirements from technology and technology developers for what they develop to be used widely, to be spread. That there's a feeling of entitlement by technology developers that once we have something new, you should take it and buy it, and that's your duty. I mean, I'm the developer, you are the consumer, and our whole world will not go around if we don't keep this implicit agreement that whatever I develop, you then change what you have for the new thing. And this is something very serious to be taken into consideration, because in many ways it is true that in this complex system of society, economy, the ruling feedback circles, the ruling subsystems are also changing sometimes. And who is actually driving the system? And the technology development is in many walks of life, certainly in consumption, driving in a way the system. So it's not really anymore, most of the time, people sitting in rooms, benevolent people, and breaking their head about how can I fulfill this really absolute need and that absolute need with something new, but having something new for novelty's sake. And I think that is a very dangerous issue.
I'm actually not blaming the technology. The technology, I think it's wonderful and can solve a lot of things, but the way the people use it. And I would quote an example of a success story, environmental success story. This is the change of car fleet in Norway, which is now 80% electric. But diesel consumption or petrol consumption decreased only 4% in the country because everyone bought the electric car as a second car and use it in the city. While going to the fjord or to the holiday, they use a petrol car. So that's and this is because the buying of electric car is subsidized, heavily subsidized in Norway. So people just took the opportunity, and then take it as a second car, and that all the technological changes didn't result in any reduction in economic or ecological food or environmental impact. So that's how people are using technology. That makes no sense. That should accompany with regulations, change regulations, way or habit or any moral issues, but without it, it's just nothing.
I completely agree with that. I think behind every technology, there's a social vision, a vision of society, what society should be like and what we serve by this technology. And this kind of vision is crucial in how we use technology and how we develop technology and who develops technology and who owns technology. And I must provoke you a little bit, Simon, here, because when I watched your presentation and I was like, yeah, the next thing we need is ammonia on an aircraft. And then I realized that you do have a social vision behind your technological solutions, but obviously you had time to talk about the technological solutions, and you didn't really have time to talk about the social vision behind what you're proposing. And if I got it right, and I'm not sure I got it right, but what you're proposing is to start moving towards a more decentralized energy system, a more democratic energy system, a more accessible energy system, a more just energy system, and for that, you're looking for solutions rather than having a solution and then, trying to find a way to have rich investors. So what's the vision? What are your visions, your social visions behind energy systems?
Yeah, Balaz, 25 minutes on stage. Ha. Yes, what I presented today is a very, very small summary of a much, much wider plan. The sequence of events in my career are look at mining, look at fossil fuel systems like oil, look at green transition. Now we've got the purple transformation. Thank you for that. But after on the other side of finding those technology systems, I'm going to be working with the Venus Project in America, and I'm going to take the work and evolve it and actually sort of bring in what I've learned from the degrowth movement, regenerative agriculture, knowledge from indigenous communities around the world, permaculture, steady state economy, circular economy, all that, and I'm going to merge it into a system. Yes, it's decentralized. But I also want to be looking at things like, can we run our society on a smaller number of components that are simpler, in a way that they're designed to be recycled by us. We don't send them to the other side of the planet to be recycled. So the vision is, instead of having a footprint that covers 6 continents and requires a degree of complexity, we are now having the entire system inside a radius of, say, 200 kilometers. Right, and so you have a network of cities. Each city is now more self-sufficient in an industrial context, but also in food production context. Each city is a hub to interact directly with the natural environment. And because we are talking about very different technologies, it's a very different social contract that allows all that to happen. Now, you have to remember, we're in this world now, and we have to use the tools of this world to build that world. So we have a series of stages of development to get there. I was looking at maintaining what we have in terms of those tools so we can actually do that. I was looking for technology, pieces of technology, not to keep the existing system going, and not even to actually build the next system, but to build a stepping stone gateway. And so the idea of thorium energy, is that the only solution? No, it's not. When I was doing a tour of duty through all energy systems, I found a whole series of things that were, as a physicist, very exciting, right? But I was not allowed to put them in my report because they're too goofy, was the exact word. Questions like, what was Nikola Tesla doing? And if it worked, how would we use it? And the final question is, should we do it? The answer is no, once you actually understand what it is, but it has a lot to teach us. Anyway, so what I'm sort of saying is this: what kind of world do we want to live in? And is it as simple as, I just want to be rich? The answer is no, because on the other side of I want to be rich is something that's not where we need to go in the current environment. So, yes, it's decentralized, but we're talking about the social evolution of the human species at a group level, but also at an individual level, where we have to actually do things differently. The whole idea of ammonia, I see, was a way of maintaining long-distance transport. It is dangerous, though. Ammonia is toxic to living things. It also is a gas at room temperature, which means we shouldn't be using it in populated areas. The idea of actually sort of running there is a system, catalytic converter system, that actually can take the exhaust and turn it into something that's less environmentally destructive. Is there an efficiency to that? Yes, so there's going to be a problem there. I saw the ammonia system as a stepping stone till we can actually sort of develop something else. It'd be a way of actually shutting down the petroleum systems sooner rather than later. A lot of these technologies I'm looking at, even the burning of iron powder, is not a long-term solution. It's a stepping stone to something else. A lot of our thinking is either we come up with a magic solution, a magic bullet, does everything, or we want a Band-Aid solution, a Band-Aid on a bullet wound. It's one of the two. So we don't think in terms of systems, and we don't think in terms of evolution over time. Like every 50 years, our technology changes. How does that happen? So 50 years from now, we might have a different kind of technology, and we're in a similar predicament, but we are actually sort of going to leap to the next stage, which is another series of technologies. At the moment, what's holding us back? Well, the way we are. There is a social plan behind what I'm trying to do. It is only the start of something. I don't have all the answers. At best, I've got the questions. But yes, that's what I want to be doing for the rest of my career.
Yes, I would like to point to another aspect which is frequently overlooked, and this is the energy consumption of certain activities which are not known to public. For example, the energy consumption of the global internet is more than the global aviation. But that's not communicated, and it's not articulated, and people are not aware that this is not green at all, because it is mostly powered by fossils. And with the introduction of, or the onset of artificial intelligence, that would be multiplied, because it requires more data, more powerful processors which consume more energy. And with current technology, this direction would lead to a tremendous increase in global energy consumption. And this is not known to public. It's not advertised. For example, flight, there is activity of flight shaming, that you have a big foot because you fly a lot, but nobody tells children that you have a big foot because you play too much with the internet. But the effect is the same. Energy-wise, it's the same effect. If you use internet a lot, then you have a big energy consumption which you are not aware of, because nobody is interested in telling you that it is a very resourceful activity.
So there's a repeating pattern today: quantity versus quality. How much stuff do we do is really low quality information, low quality physical goods, low quality actions, low quality food? What if we did less of everything but higher quality actions? And what we says is what we want, what we need, and what we do become the same thing. I'm hearing that basic theme again and again at all these conferences. And if we did that simple step, a lot of the crap that we're dealing with would be sorted out.
Yep. Again, just one more comment to this energy question. I'm not an energy expert, but I think there are two more notions here. One is the requirement of energy communism or energy socialism, and by this I mean that according to needs. So people living near the polar regions will always require more energy, I guess, than people nearer to the tropics orbit. This might also change with time, but you get my point. But the other issue is the energy for emergency situations. And until now, we were talking about basically how to do this transformation. What about the energy aspects of the transformation? What about the global eco-social system operating on different energy resources, less harmful, and so on and so forth. But then coming back once again into the deep adaptation scenario and the big disruptions, it remains still a very valid question of how well we will be prepared in any part or region of the world with essential services. So how can we build from a very internal core these circles which we had already on the screen of increasing importance, these layers of the common good to be served, these degrees of comfort to the community at the core there's the very essential survival, the energy needed for survival and very basic life support, and then how can we again regain comfort in different degrees and layers by supplying different institutions and different energy users. So that's also something which would need some thought.
I think probably my last question, looking at the clock, my last question is, I'm painfully aware of the fact that we are at the World Adaptation Forum. And so my last question is going to be, when it comes to what we should do, is there a major difference between adaptation and mitigation?
Yeah. At a fundamental level, human indifference seems to be the biggest bottleneck we're facing. It's not stupidity, it's actually indifference. Many people understand these issues, but they sort of see it as someone else's problem, and trying to motivate them to look at these problems, let alone engage in what the solution might be. Never mind what the solutions could be. Getting people to actually engage properly at all seems to be the biggest bottleneck, if you will. If every single human being actually took this stuff seriously, there'd be a lot more information flying back and forth, but we wouldn't be in a situation where people say things like there's way too much talky and not enough wickety-whack. Getting to the point where someone actually does something would have happened a long time ago if we didn't have the indifference. And that are, like, what do we believe? What do we think? That seems to be the very first step in social engagement, which then leads to actual outcome.
Yeah, but there are very, very different ways of adaptation. If we are talking about humanity, if we are talking about human communities, then one way to adapt to people to adapt to changing environmental framework conditions is, for instance, to get less in number, to decrease the size of the community or the population. Now that's not a very nice thing. There are ways of adaptation which, from a scientific point of view and very cold analysis, are on the long run and from an ecological point of view a way of adaptation to changing conditions. We don't want that. So we better mitigate as much as we can so that we don't need to adapt too much. Okay, that's one relationship between the two. But the other one is, again, that we have this really absolute need of preparing for the unexpected, unexpected, and we don't want to let mitigation go because of the reasons aforementioned. And therefore, here comes this often mentioned and maybe boring expression of the win-win solutions, but it exists. We really have to look for multi-solving, as one of my colleagues in America is calling her institute. So solutions which are actually targeting more than one problem at the same time. We have to look at points in the system which are enablers, points which are avalanches in a positive sense. That if I, for instance, stop subsidizing fossil fuels, then I trigger at least, not to subsidize fossil fuels is one of the SDG targets. If we would do that, we would immediately contribute at least to a dozen other targets implementation as an automatism. And of course, the best such places in a system are measures which would trigger virtuous cycles, positive feedback loops in the right direction. So we would have to look for measures like this, possibly working both ways, and then we are also efficient. That's a magic word.
I am over time now. I don't like the word mitigation because people usually think of mitigation as changing energy production. So replacing fossils with renewables and everything will be fine. Or secondly, we haven't talked about it now, is geoengineering. So technology will fix the climate, will fix everything, which is absolutely nonsense. And if there is only one way of mitigation, is reducing our consumption, eliminating unnecessary activities, and live more modestly and wisely, and probably more happily. If that is mitigation, then I support mitigation, but adaptation needs to be done anyway, because there are changes in the environment, climate, which we cannot cope with, so we need to adapt to. But besides, we need mitigation in the form which people are not thinking of.
Same, put your microphone on.
Yeah.
Okay.
So you missed the great closing words, but hopefully you did hear some of it. And thank you very much for this discussion. I can only hope that the questions I didn't have chance to ask, my friend and colleague Zoltán will ask in the next panel. And yes, see you all after the break.